Please follow me into the last one. I'll point out one more thing before we go on. In here you get to see the third, I can show you the third design feature that the site was designed to protect against. And that was the earthquake type shock wave that would occur with a nuclear blast. Everything that was mission critical was mounted on shock absorbers in some way or the other, such as those two huge springs providing shock protection for the motor controllers there. There was lots of slack left in the cable so that the motor controllers could bounce up and down without any chance that the wiring would be pulled out of them. If it was not mission critical, such as those filter panels back there, the wiring went directly in. They were mounted solidly to the wall. Even things like the lighting, the signal lights, the emergency light were shock mounted to provide protection against the earthquake type shock wave. Please follow me. We'll go on into the Launch Control Center. I believe that the carpet was here, at least during most of the time. That was to absorb a little bit of the noise that existed down here. There was a major amount of noise because each of these racks had blowers in them for cooling purposes, so the noise level within the Launch Control Center was pretty high, and in fact the crews made use of headphones in order to be able to communicate while they were within the launch control area here, and be certain that everybody heard what they were supposed to. Why don't you take a seat? Okay, today's the 17th, isn't it?
Yeah. Nice knowing you all.
We'll still be here with you.
Oh yeah. Nice knowing you, young man.
Normally I have a young lady sit in the seat there. The reason for that was that in the mid-70s, the United States military started to place women in combat roles. So the first combat positions opened up to women in the Air Force was as on the missile crews. So that was the reason we normally put a lady in the chair and in the commander's chair.
He's so enthusiastic, though. Couldn't take that.
So, no problem, but there were men that sat in this chair, many men that sat in that chair also, but that was the first position for women on a combat crew in the Air Force, and in fact the director of our museum, she had sat in that chair during part of her career in the late 70s, early 80s. I want to point out here, I said that everything is mounted on shock absorbers, but you see here these racks of equipment are mounted solidly to the floor. The floor above us, which is the crew's quarters, which was shown in the video, except for the small latrine up there, was solidly mounted to this level. There's a level down below us, which was an equipment bay for radio equipment, for power conversion equipment, for pumps and everything else that was necessary to make this a livable area up here. Anyway, that one was mounted solidly to this one. But I want to point out, these 3 levels are suspended on 8 huge springs, 2 over there, 2 behind the ventilating equipment over here, and you'll see 2 more pairs of them behind the consoles over here. So, and each floor has a gap of about 10 to 12 inches from the wall, which is covered by a rubber boot, which allowed this whole interior in what is like a huge bird cage shaped area to be able to load up and down if there was a nearby nuclear blast. I mentioned about a nearby nuclear blast when I say that. If it was closer than 1.5 miles, likely this site would be taken out and be destroyed by a blast. So they were hoping that anything that came in was off by at least 1.5 miles then. Going around real quickly, the silver core thing back there is the airlock, blast airlock for the intake air into the launch control center here. If there was a blast outside that created an overpressure of more than 2 psi, that would automatically close, sealing it off. That could also be closed if there was a tipsy alarm that indicated there was a breach of security between the tipsy, that pair of tipsies that I pointed out above the air shaft. So that provided protection against for the air source to the crew. That would also be closed during a launch sequence. The red safe is the emergency water safe. The contents of that would be include the authentication cards, launch keys, and the padlocks. There are 2 padlocks on it. One was owned by the commander, one was owned by the deputy that were on duty at that time. At crew changeover, the on-duty commander deputy would remove their padlocks, and after the contents of the safe and everything else had been certain to be correct here at the site, the new oncoming commander and deputy would hang their padlocks onto the safe, and they'd be responsible for the site for the next 24 hours. Crew cycle was basically 24 hours here. Then they'd have 24 hours for rest and 1 to 2 days for squadron activities, training over at, for this site, Davis-Montham then, to keep up on, to make certain that they had everything down for doing a launch. The deputy commander, typically a 1st or 2nd lieutenant, would sit at this console. The deputy was responsible for the 3 racks of radio equipment there. The deputy could raise the the hardened antennas if something happened with the soft antennas. The deputy kept track of where everybody was located on the site, making use of this plexiglass board and a grease pencil to track where everybody was located at for safety and for security purposes. The deputy was also responsible for the 24-hour, 8-day wind-up clock here, which was wound every Sunday and then was packed against the atomic clock in Fort Collins, Colorado, twice per day. So that, if you'll notice, that clock is 7 hours ahead of the clock over here. How many of you are familiar with the reason for that?
I used to work, and that's a security policeman
Uh-huh.
at this type missile sites.
Oh, okay, very good.
So,
Hopefully what I'm telling you is correct then. Or at least close. Anyway, the this clock was set 7 hours ahead to Greenwich Mean Time, or Zulu time for the military, so that any activities could be coordinated regardless of where they are in the world against a single time value, eliminating confusion about the time the operation was to take place. So that was the launch clock. This is the lunch clock. The commander sat at this console, typically a captain or a major. Think of this as the dashboard of an automobile. Basically, it summarized the conditions of the site here. The bottom row was the facilities, indicators for the facilities, fire suppression and gate controls. Next row up showed the reentry vehicle status, missile status, guidance system status, power status. Top row was target selection and the launch sequence. Communications, make note of our modern 1960s era rotary dial phone, which has since been replaced with our smartphones, so it's a lot easier to do texting. Anyway, this was the commander's console. There was two highly trained individuals who were on the crew, which were enlisted personnel. They were the ballistic missile analyst technician, the BMAT, and the second one was the missile facilities technician. Think of the missile facilities technician as the person who would be the facilities manager, and the BMAT was very knowledgeable about the launch control system and also the missile itself. If any of the indicators did not show the right color, then the whichever of those crewmen were responsible for that rack of equipment or that equipment, they would then go through troubleshooting procedures and call the appropriate maintenance people from Davis-Montham to come out and actually service the equipment. They were much more troubleshooters than they were than they perform maintenance themselves. The